All right, Clean Freaks, my name's Hank Balch. You're listening to episode 9 of Hank versus the Robot. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking to Sterile Simon about incident reporting in surgical services. We're focused on the operating room and sterile processing. And we're going to talk about the gaps in incident reporting at the beginning, why, and the data that tells us so many errors go unreported or underreported. And then we're going to flesh out the impact of that on our mission to improve our processes. If we don't know that anything is broken, we can never fix it. So we're going to dive into all of those topics. Hopefully we're going to share some information that you're not aware of and give you some insight and direction on how to start capturing and then fixing the errors that you're experiencing in your facility. So without further ado, Simon, welcome back to the show today.
Thanks, Hank. It's great to be back. The topic of incident reporting is like the dust under a sterile processing workstation. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there, and ignoring it only makes the problem worse. I'm excited to unpack the research and dig into why so many errors go unreported, what that means for patient safety, and how we can start shifting the culture and processes in our facilities to make reporting not just easier, but essential. Let's get into it.
All right, well, kick us off by two of the more recent studies that highlight the prevalence of unreported incidents in the surgical setting, and then flesh out the data and the findings, and of course, why we should be interested in what they have to say.
Absolutely, Hank. Let's dive into two key studies that really shed light on the issue of unreported incidents in surgery and sterile processing. The first study comes from the BMJ Quality and Safety. It looked at equipment-related incidents in operating rooms. Now, here's the shocking part. Out of 148 documented equipment-related issues, only 6 were logged in the hospital's formal reporting system. That's less than 5%. The study found that barriers to reporting included a lack of time, a fear of blame, and even a sense that certain incidents weren't worth reporting. This highlights a major gap. If incidents aren't documented, they might as well not exist when it comes to analyzing and improving processes. The second study, cited by the Department of Health and Human Services, focused on SPD-related sterilization failures. It found that 86% of identified sterilization errors were never reported internally. Think about that. Nearly 9 out of 10 times, issues like improper sterilization weren't flagged. This is particularly concerning because those errors directly impact patient safety, surgical outcomes, and the department's credibility. The primary reasons? A mix of inadequate training on what to report, fears of retribution, and the mindset of just fix it and move on. Why should we care? These unreported incidents form the blind spots in our systems. If you don't see the error trends, whether it's repeated sterilization issues, missing instruments, or OR delays, you can't root out the causes. You're left reacting to the consequences, which might mean compromised patient care, costly inefficiencies, or even litigation. It's a wake-up call for the industry. Unreported issues aren't just paperwork problems. They're a symptom of deeper cultural and systemic barriers that we need to address head on.
Simon, those data points are shocking. Anybody clinically who understands the implications of what you just said, 9 out of 10 instrument issues go unreported, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, right? Only 6 out of 148 equipment-related incidents were reported previously in the incident reporting system. Massive numbers here. But here's part of the reality, and we can flesh this out maybe later in the interview, but we've got departments out there and even facilities that are sitting around, looking at their error rate and kind of patting themselves on the back and saying, hey, I got this percentage error rate. And they're holding celebrations and they're putting on bulletin boards. And, more power to you if you're making improvements, if you're reducing errors. I don't want to undermine the success and the improvement that people are making, but we're kind of grading on a curve, aren't we?
Absolutely, Hank. That's exactly it. When you're working with incomplete data, where 9 out of 10 issues in SPD or the OR go unreported, you're not seeing the whole picture. So any low error rate you're celebrating might not be telling the real story. It's not that folks are trying to sweep things under the rug, but systemic issues like time constraints, lack of training, or fear of blame create these blind spots. The danger is that we end up grading ourselves on a curve that's based more on what we think is happening rather than what's actually happening. Celebrations are great, but if they're based on incomplete data, it's like putting a gold star on a process that might still have foundational cracks. We need to prioritize transparency in reporting so that when we pat ourselves on the back, we're doing it for the right reasons and with the full context.
I know I'm kind of stepping all up in the middle of people's business on this episode, but we're doing it right because this data is real risk, and this is kind of going back to the previous episode that we did around the risk assessments. But these are not just data points, not just numbers on a spreadsheet. Real risk that's connected to every one of these unreported errors. And if we're building risk assessments off of data and the data is incomplete, then our risk assessments are also incomplete. And it could be telling us something's not a high risk when the actual data, if all of the incidents were captured and reported, it's a critical risk. And so these implications are not hypothetical. It's real. It's hugely important. To continue us on down this track, though, here, Simon, maybe let's talk about the causes for this underreporting that was surfaced in the two studies that you mentioned. I know you alluded to the time constraints and pressures, but speak maybe to the time constraint piece, but then also to this kind of blame piece or the psychological piece that clinicians would intentionally decide not to report an incident, even if they understand and they realize, hey, there's risk that's associated with this incident.
You're spot on, Hank. This isn't hypothetical at all. These gaps in reporting are creating blind spots in our risk assessments, and that's a dangerous game. When incomplete data informs decision-making, what you think is a manageable risk could actually be a ticking time bomb. That's why understanding the why behind underreporting is so critical. Let's tackle the causes. First, the time constraint issue. Sterile processing and OR teams are constantly under pressure. Turnover times are tight, staff are stretched thin, and when something goes wrong, like a missing instrument or an equipment failure, the instinct is often to just fix it and move on. Reporting becomes another task on an already overloaded plate. It's not that they don't care, it's that they're prioritizing immediate needs over documentation, often because there's no immediate feedback loop showing the value of that extra step. Now, the psychological side, the blame culture. Many clinicians have been burned by systems that equate reporting an error with admitting personal failure. Nobody wants to be the one who gets called out, especially when they're doing their best in a high-pressure environment. Even in organizations that claim to have a blame-free culture, the lingering fear of repercussions can keep people silent. It's like, why risk the hassle or the potential fallout when I can quietly correct the issue and move on? These two factors combine to create the perfect storm of underreporting. Until we address both, making reporting quick, intuitive, and rewarding while also creating a truly blame-free culture, we're going to keep seeing these gaps in the data. And as you said, Hank, those gaps aren't just theoretical. They're putting patients, processes, and entire departments at risk.
All right, Simon, let's talk a little bit here about addressing the intake, those barriers to intake of the reporting that you've alluded to actually just now. And we've got to make this error reporting process as simple, intuitive, available as possible. There's more and more digital programs out there that are trying to do that, but as we've just seen, the data still is saying, hey, we're not seeing the level of uptick that we need to capture the majority of the incidents that are happening. So if you were to give advice to innovators or to department leaders on how to develop and to solve for some of those barriers to reporting, where would you start and what would you recommend?
Great question, Hank. And I'd start by focusing on two key areas: ease of use and cultural reinforcement. Let me break those down. First, for innovators developing reporting tools, simplicity is king. The process needs to be as frictionless as possible. If someone can order a coffee from their phone in seconds, we should be able to design a reporting system that's just as quick. Think mobile apps or touchscreen kiosks in the department, tools that integrate seamlessly with existing workflows. Pre-filled fields, drop-down menus, and voice-to-text options can streamline the process. The goal is to reduce the cognitive load so much that reporting feels like a natural extension of their work, not an extra task. Second, Department leaders need to build a culture where reporting is not just encouraged, but celebrated. This starts at the top. Leadership has to model transparency and show that reports are tools for improvement, not ammunition for blame. Share success stories where incident reporting led to meaningful changes, like better equipment or safer practices. Incentivize it, even if it's as simple as a shout out during a department meeting or a small token of appreciation. Another critical piece is feedback. If someone takes the time to submit a report, they need to see what happens next. Did their report lead to a system update? Did it highlight a training gap? Closing that loop shows people that their effort matters and builds trust in the process. Lastly, invest in education. Teach staff not just how to report, but why it matters. If people understand that a single report can prevent harm to a patient or protect a teammate from burnout, they're more likely to engage. So to sum it up, make it easy, make it meaningful, and make it matter. If you can solve for those barriers, you're well on your way to closing the reporting gap.
Man, what a good quote. I love that. I love that. And that feedback piece, absolutely right. If we had more immediate feedback after you report an error, that it doesn't feel like it's going into this black hole, that maybe someone's going to look at it in 3 months, but by then, so many other surgeries have happened, and potentially that error has continued to happen again, and again. You don't know how many other people have reported the same incident. Has there been staffing changes? Has there been processing changes? Is there change on the way, but it's going to take a couple of weeks for approval? None of that feedback is being given today to the average person who's reporting an error. So yeah, I can see psychologically how you're like, why am I going to take time out of my day to do something that may or may not be seen, be read, or reacted to? I think that's massive, and I can see the implications there. Let's move to a practical area of this error incident question in sterile processing. And right now, the vast majority of errors that would be reported in sterile processing, or I guess maybe that's connected to sterile processing, these errors would be captured in the operating room. So there's a dirty instrument in the OR, or there's an instrument that the chemical indicator didn't change, or there's a missing instrument out of a tray. All those kinds of things are captured in the OR. Those are data points that are captured in the OR, but it's actually errors that were made in SPD. However, I want to pick your brain a little bit about a particular spot in the sterile processing workflow that it's really common for errors to be seen. It's really uncommon for them to be reported, and that is in the assembly area of our department. So the prep and pack, the clean area. And we're looking at trays that have come out of the decontamination area, they've come out of the washers, and now we're putting human eyes and inspection on them for the first time post-decontamination. And at that stage, we're often finding dirty instruments that were not properly cleaned. We're identifying that there's instruments that are missing out of this tray. They could be completely missing from the inventory. We can't find them anywhere. Or they could be instruments that were not returned in the tray that they were sent up in. We're finding damaged instruments in our tray. There's a lot of issues like this, and you know what happens? Exactly what you said. We fix the problem in the immediate. Oh, if it's a dirty instrument, okay, we send it back to decontaminate, get them to re-clean it. Oh, it's a missing instrument, okay, we get a replacement instrument off the wall and we replace it. Okay, there's a broken instrument, okay, we take it out, we send it for repair, and we put a new instrument in. But all of that data, all those data points, for the most part, are not being captured in any kind of incident reporting or tracking or quality to do exactly what you're saying, to surface this data so that we can really see where the gaps and opportunities are. What are your thoughts on that gap, and do you have any advice or insight around that?
Hank, you've zeroed in on one of the most critical black holes in sterile processing workflows, the prep and pack area. This is where so much valuable data lives and dies because it's handled in the moment, but rarely recorded. It's like a silent triage zone for errors where the problem gets fixed, but the root cause is never addressed. The issue here is that This stage is the first human touch point after automated cleaning, so it's where all those upstream errors are revealed. Dirty instruments, missing items, or damaged tools, they're all symptoms of deeper process gaps in decontamination, inventory management, or even vendor compliance. If we're not capturing those data points, we're leaving a gold mine of process improvement insights untapped. To address this gap, I'd suggest a few key strategies. One, create a culture of micro-reporting. We need to shift the mindset in prep and pack to see these moments not as annoying fixes, but as critical quality events. If every dirty instrument sent back to decon or every missing tool added from backup inventory was logged quickly and easily, that data could tell a powerful story over time. Two, leverage technology. Digital tools could be a game changer here. Barcode scanners or tracking software can integrate error reporting into the assembly process without disrupting workflow. For example, when an issue is identified, a quick scan and drop-down menu could log the type of error, its location in the tray, and the corrective action. This keeps reporting as painless as possible. Three, feedback loops for accountability. Just like in incident reporting, prep and pack staff need to see that their reports are leading to action. If they log 5 dirty instruments from the same tray type in a week, leadership should be feeding that data back to decon for process review or checking if the washers are performing adequately. Accountability drives engagement. 4, establish clear metrics. Set goals for error identification in prep and pack. It might sound counterintuitive, but encouraging teams to surface more errors initially can uncover the hidden issues you're describing. Over time, the goal becomes reducing the root causes, not just fixing the symptoms. By capturing and analyzing this data, you're no longer putting out fires, you're building a fireproof system. And that's how you go from reactive fixes to proactive improvements, creating a safer and more efficient sterile processing operation.
Yeah, Simon, I'm stuck on that feedback loop. I mean, that's such a critical piece to this because even as you were speaking, there are some tracking systems out there today in sterile processing that allow you to document quality incidents in the moment. If it's in decon, if it's in prep and pack, if it's in sterilization, there's a quick drop-down menu, you document the incident and you move on. But I'm not aware of any systems today that have a robust process or automation on that feedback loop piece to transparently communicate back to the technician what actions were taken, how many other similar errors have been reported on those topics, and really make it a conversation that's two-way versus just try to get this data point out of that technician in the moment. I think that's so key. As we wrap here, Simon, I'm sure there's going to be folks that are like, you know what, I want to read more, I want to think more about this topic. What are some recent academic research and, papers or publications out there that have highlighted the conversation of incident reporting within surgical service and sterile processing that we've been talking about today?
Hank, you're absolutely right. Without that feedback loop, even the best tracking systems can feel like a black hole for technicians. It's a massive missed opportunity for engagement and real-time improvement. But for those who want to dig deeper into this topic, here are some standout studies and resources that frame the issue of incident reporting and its challenges in sterile processing and surgical services. 1. BMJ Quality and Safety. This study on equipment-related incidents in the operating room revealed how less than 5% of incidents were formally reported. It's a great read for understanding the systemic barriers to reporting and why they persist. 2. Department of Health and Human Services report. This investigation into sterilization failures highlighted that 86% of these issues go unreported internally. It's a sobering reminder of the scale of the problem and the need for systemic change. 3. Lean Six Sigma in SPD, Joint Commission Journal on Quality and Patient Safety. This paper dives into how Lean Six Sigma methodologies can identify and reduce inefficiencies like missing instruments or case delays, providing actionable solutions for tracking and improvement. 4. Addressing SPD instrument errors with technology, infection control today. This article examines how visualization tools and advanced data tracking are tackling errors in sterile processing. It's a forward-looking piece that offers ideas for integrating technology into incident tracking and reporting. 5. Incident Reporting in Sterile Processing, American Journal of Infection Control, a study that explores quality monitoring approaches, including the role of education and reporting systems to reduce errors and improve outcomes. These resources are all about shining a light on those blind spots we've been discussing and offering solutions to close the loop, both in tracking errors and ensuring they lead to meaningful action. It's fascinating, eye-opening reading for anyone serious about improving safety and efficiency in healthcare.
All right, Simon, as always, a terrific conversation today. I learned a ton. I'm inspired to dig deeper into solving this incident, reporting black hole. I think that's the illusion that we've used a couple of times here on this episode. It's critical, but man, there's so much data to be gleaned. And I'm going to continue to think about that feedback loop piece. I think that is a huge gap in our current approach to driving more incident reporting, but then also to cultivating that culture piece that you alluded to too. So a great job today. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Hank. It's always a pleasure to dive into these big conversations with you. You're absolutely right. There's so much potential in closing that feedback loop and turning incident reporting from a black hole into a lighthouse for process improvement. The more we focus on empowering frontline teams with transparent, actionable systems, the closer we get to a truly resilient culture of safety and quality. I'm excited to see where your insights take this next. Thanks for having me, and until next time, keep pushing for progress.
And Simon, I got to get you to wrap by saying keep fighting dirty. Great job on that little pun to, turning the black hole into the lighthouse for safety. I think that's a great way to wrap this episode. And to the audience, I hope you're enjoying these conversations as much as I am. I can already tell, man, these things are getting better and better with each episode. I feel like we're getting deeper into concrete problems and opportunities. We're digging in, we're fleshing out implications. It's just it's a ton of fun. I'm getting better at interviewing the AI, understanding how to position my questions a little bit better to get more in-depth answers and whatnot. And who knows, maybe the AI is learning a thing or two about me along the way as well. Spooky. But anyways, if you've got feedback on this topic, incident reporting and gaps and opportunities, if you've got a process or technology that you think is just the bee's knees, or if you want to contribute to solving this problem and, I don't know, building a network out there, or kind of raising your hand so innovators know if they're working on it, that they can tap you as a sterile processing clinician to pull into the process and make sure that it is as user-friendly and that they're keen in on creating those valuable feedback loops. And make sure to comment anywhere that you're hearing this episode so I can see you, the innovators can see you. Drop your comments or your best practices in the comment section so that I can hear more and learn more about what's happening out there in the front lines today. And as we wrapped too, check out some of those articles that Simon mentioned. Just Google the titles, Google the publication name out there, and it should pull it up for you here pretty quick. Or actually, I guess you can go to ChatGPT and type it in as well. It should be able to track it down for you. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap it here on this episode of Hank versus the Robot. I want to thank you all again for sticking with us through this disruptive, one-of-a-kind, first-of-its-kind experience in healthcare and in sterile processing, human plus AI. Here we go. Buckle up. Who knows where this train is going, but I promise you it's going to be a lot of fun along the way. And until we talk to you again next time, folks, keep fighting dirty.